minute.
And then
all right.
also, if you
certainly a critical mass on the phone and behind the computer. So thank you so much for dialing in today. This is Jenny Staff from the Social Innovation Fund. So glad to have everyone dialed in for the first of two technical assistance webinars for Pay for Success, focused on economic and financial modeling. So the first thing that I just want to say are a few logistics. First of all, this webinar is going to be recorded, so if you don't feel comfortable with that, just make sure that your line stays silent and muted. Please do keep your phones on mute. We'll end the webinar, the last 10 to 15 minutes, with a Q&A period where we'll unmute your phones and you'll actually be able to ask the question. You won't need to type the question. So just know that that's coming. We won't do Q&A throughout the webinar, so just keep a pen and paper handy if you have questions. So what I'd like to do now is actually begin with a poll. So if JBS could, here we are. So it's please rate your level of experience in economic and financial modeling for PFS projects on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being completely novice and 5 being expert level. And I'll let people complete that in a few minutes, for just a minute.
This is not GoToMeeting, huh? This is a different for WebEx.
Just a reminder to keep your phones on mute.
Or is that good for you? Want me to lower it a little bit?
Okay, and we're going to close the poll. In 10 seconds. Okay, so before we get the results of the poll, I just want to give everyone a little bit of background, a refresher to how this webinar came about. So you all might remember that we had sent out to the grantees about 2 months ago or 3 months ago questions around what kinds of technical assistance from the SIF on the Pay for Success program they would find most valuable. You came back to us with a resounding preference for economic and financial modeling training. So the great news about that is that we have some expertise among our grantees in this realm. So to that end, we've put together actually a webinar series. This is the first of 2. So we're so glad that Brian Beachkofski from Third Sector Capital Partners, Senior Director there, will be leading us today in the first webinar. So here is who's on the phone. It looks like it is kind of split a little bit between folks who are pretty new at this and some who are experts. So that is really interesting, and I think that that will allow for some really interesting questions, and potentially even when we open up the Q&A at the end of the webinar, there can be some back and forth even among those of you who view yourselves as experts and those who we lovingly say are novices. So without further ado, I'm going to toss it right over to Brian. Brian, please take it away.
Thanks, Jenny. You can go ahead and move to the next slide. I just want to say thank you, first of all, to SIF for having us participate and be here sharing what we've learned over our experience with several projects. And we'll go into a little depth on what those projects have looked like in the past, as well as go into some of the modeling efforts that have led to those projects launching to date. So we'll go over our firm a little bit just to give some background on why you should think we have some experience in this, and then a review of how we approach modeling, and then leave 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes for a question and answer at the end. Next slide, please. So Third Sector is a 501c3 that is focused at moving America towards a performance-driven social sector. And we think that Pay for Success is a great way to do this because it allows for a quicker move, because governments can transfer that risk out to the private investors who may have more of a risk appetite for that. We have many projects across the country, including, as of Friday, we've announced the launch of the Santa Clara Homelessness Project in California. So it was a big day for us last week. And I think, again, the experience and our basis in modeling has been developed over the course of not only our launch projects, but those still under construction.
Just whenever it's available.
And then, so hopefully we can help share some of those lessons learned and make the nation's progress in Pay for Success continue to go at a fast pace. Next slide.
Everyone, sorry, this is Jenny. Just a reminder to mute your lines. If you've just joined us, we can hear you. Brian.
Thank you. So we see that Pay for Success is measurably improving the lives of the people most in need by driving resources towards better, effective programs. And the way we connect that sort of central vision of Pay for Success into the model, so we understand how each model relates back to that core statement, is depicted on the right-hand side of the screen. Understanding how the capital stack is a representation of the resources available. Population analytics describe the population. Intervention, the historical evidence base, represents that intervention side. But I think one of the more interesting pieces of modeling are not within the core of each of those three bubbles, but it's at the interfaces between them. So for example, how does the population interface with the intervention is through the referral pathway. That's how that boundary gets represented in the model. As well as a time phase cost structure is how those resources are allocated towards the intervention over the course of a project. So the boundaries are really where you connect the individual pieces together to create a cohesive program. Next slide. Since this is primarily for the grantees and sub-grantees of the Pay for Success program under SIF, I'm sure everyone is aware of the Pay for Success model, so I'm not going to go through that. But I think if we use that basis and that framework for thinking about who the players are and relating the modeling efforts to each of those players, it'll also help put each model in context so it's not seen as an independent piece. So starting with a population analysis, we really try and turn that underserved population into a reachable, screenable population. So what are those metrics that define a qualifying member of a population to come into the program? That then translates into the referral pathway, which is a connection between that population and the service provider. At the same time, the funders provide the initial funding, but how that breaks out is in the capital stack design, and when you turn that into the drawdown for the service providers on how they'll actually execute those funds over time, that becomes that time-phased cost structure. The historical evidence base is what the evaluators use to help design what the evaluation will look like, and then bringing in together their assessment of the overall impact. It triggers what are the success payments, and then you model as well what the waterfall is for success payments back to the initial investors. Next slide. And because it's pretty complicated, we put one more way to view this, and this is tracking the service and payment flow and how the models fit within the project that way. This one is pretty self-explanatory, but it again shows which models are directly related to individual players and which ones are those interfaces. So not a lot to add to what's already been said, but a different way to visualize it. Success payments are the connection of the government to the operating account. The capital stack is the model of the private funder investment. The cost structure is the operating account flow to the service provider. And the referral pathway is the population to the service provider. So again, you have both those primary points of players as well as those intersections between members of the Pay for Success program. Next slide. An important term or concept to understand in modeling is the difference between a stock and a flow. The way to think about this, and it's the most used analogy, is a bathtub. How much water is entering the bathtub or leaving through the drain is a flow. It is a number over some period of time. So it's gallons per minute are entering or leaving a bathtub, whereas the amount that's currently in the bathtub at any given moment is the stock that you have. So the total, so the way to look at the models could be, again, what is a time-dependent model, and then what is an overall stock model. So the total population that's reached is a stock. The referral pathway will model how many of that population are entering in any given quarter of a project. Same with the financial modeling. You can have the overall waterfall and the overall capital stack, but you can also have the flows, which are the drawdown rates over every quarter, or the success payment waterfall as the success payments come in. But very, very important difference between the sum over the entire project, which is the stock, and the time-dependent pieces, which are the flow. Next slide. So that's sort of the background of Pay for Success and where the models fit into the overall program. The next will be getting into the more detailed elements of the model itself. Next slide, please. So why do we have models? What is the purpose of the model, and why can't we just do this by getting people in a room and agreeing and shaking hands and walking out? Well, the model gets people to get to common agreement on the assumptions. When you have to write down your assumptions and put numbers to them, it makes it very obvious that there's common understanding by all parties. And when you have a multi-party agreement, like a Pay for Success arrangement, it's very important that you explicitly make sure that people are working to the same assumptions and not just hope that they have the same thought in their head that you have in yours. So the model gives a concrete representation of your concept of the project for someone else to review. More specifically, what it does is it puts those assumptions in a way that shows not just what the assumptions are, but how you think those assumptions affect the overall program. So not just how much you think a program costs, but how that cost will be used over time, and how success payments are linked back directly to the outcomes that those initial funds would realize through the intervention. So it provides a very concrete, reviewable list of assumptions, as well as how those assumptions affect the end product. And that end state is determined through the calculations. So the way to look through it is your inputs are your set of assumptions, the calculations is how those assumptions affect the end product, and then your output are those results that are calculated through the system. Next slide, please. So going into individual analysis, the first one we'll look at is the target population. There are several things to think about when you look at a population. First is what piece of the overall reachable population are you intending to serve? So when you look at, in this example, a homelessness population, you could have the entire homeless population of a given district. You could have the chronic homeless, and there would be a given discrete definition of what chronic homeless means. Or you could have other contributing factors, so for example, those that have the highest use of other services, or that may have mental health, or that may have addiction issues as well as being chronically homeless. So those are very distinct groups, and you have to identify through your population model not only how big you think it is, but what are those screening criteria that make someone part of the served population. And again, the model provides an assumption and a codification of what defines the population, as well as what the assumptions are on the total reachable population for the program. Next slide. So if that's the stock model, the total number of people in the population, what you need to do is translate that into the referral pathway and the numbers and the members of that population that are reachable over the length of the program. And one of the important things to consider is the attrition rate through the referral pathway. So if we imagine, and one other piece on that, is not just the attrition, but the time delay that happens. So not everyone is reachable at the very start of a program, and not everyone successfully that you approach successfully completes the program. So understanding where in the referral pathway you have people attrit from your program is important, as well as understanding the time delay. There are several concrete examples of where that time delay is important, especially on evaluation. So to walk through this, if on day 0 of your program launch you have a total target population size that you think you can refer, you then have to look at what is the actual time it takes to reach a population, and some portion of that total population will be unreachable. Some will not be referred for other reasons. Some will not agree to be part of a intervention or part of a evaluation process. Some will not complete the intervention that you are providing to them, and others drop out for other reasons along the way. So understanding, if I want to have 10 people at the back end, what does that mean for the number of people I have to approach on a continuing basis is really important. If you don't understand the attrition through the process, you will not reach the number of people you need to get to the proper evaluation at the back end. And the time delay is also a piece to consider. It takes time to go through a program. It takes time to set people up, and it can be a not insignificant portion of time. So imagine if you have a referral pathway where just the paperwork, the delay, getting consent, maybe you have to send someone for testing for initial screening, that process can take a couple months. And if you start watching your initial metrics on evaluation, you may say, I don't see anything happening for a couple months. Well, for you to know whether or not that's good or bad, you have to understand the natural system time cycle. So that's one of the really important benefits of modeling correctly the attrition and the time delay through that referral pathway. Next slide, please. One of the ways to visualize this is to actually show each of the quarters or months, in this case, of a program over time. So you can show, this is just notional number I made up with some random variation around a mean behavior. But if you accept that you have an average intake of 7 per month, that you have people in the program for 12 months after intake, you'll see that each of these cohorts will grow over time and then come back out. So imagine if you said, well, we're going to have a 3-year program. It will actually be 4 years, because it takes the first year to grow people in. You have 2 years of implementing, and then the fourth year is actually that last cohort going through the program and eventually coming back out. So understanding and showing graphically how the population flow through the intervention is important, especially now it's a way to tie it to financial modeling. So as your population and treatment grows, you need to expand your capability and your capacities within the intervention group. Next slide. So this is another slide just showing as you model through Excel, you can take into account the referral. You can model each of the eligibility criteria. You can get as detailed as you want as far as number of the population that you find either pass or don't pass each step of the referral pathway. In practice, this is done within third sector on a spreadsheet where we model quarter by quarter behavior, treating each quarter's inductees as a separate cohort. Next slide, please. Excuse me. Because we have this detailed modeling of cohorts and quarters, it's very hard to show that to someone and have them understand. Just by reading a spreadsheet, it can be fairly overwhelming if you can even find a large enough piece of paper to print it out on. So we tend to take a summary page that takes the relevant, most relevant pieces of data off of the actual calculations and brings them into one place. So oftentimes you can have on the summary page where your assumptions are and then what that means as far as the outputs. So having all that in one place allows you to play around as well to say, what if we change this assumption, how sensitive is the model to those assumptions, and summarize your data in one place that is more accessible. Yeah, I think that's the key part here. Next slide, please. So as I was saying, when you have the population and the referral pathway modeled correctly, as you go through your cost assumptions and work with your providers on what their cost structure looks like, you can take that number of population within the referral or within the treatment and then any given quarter and turn that into a model of what the capital requirements are on a quarter-by-quarter basis. And you should break this out not just by what the required costs are by the provider on a fixed and marginal cost basis, but also what are those ancillary costs? How much is program management going to be? How much are other services that are required for the execution of the pay-for-success contract and the like? So make sure that on your costs and programs that you take into account all the costs associated with a program and not just the intervention. Next slide, please. And when you develop that, you can then take the flow, which is the quarterly costs, and build those up into what is the required capital needed to execute that program. And this was what will define your capital stack. So through the model, you've actually been able to take the total reachable population, connect that to a quarterly population flow, turn the quarterly population flow into a required funding by quarter, and then bring that together to create your necessary capital stack to fund the program. Now the capital stack is just a top number, and then it's for you to determine how best to break that out through junior, senior, in other tranches to satisfy the needs of the program. So the size of the capital stack will also then be tied into what the size of the success pool is. Because of the time phase of the capital stack drawdown, you'll be able to determine how much money is necessary, how many success payments are needed to cover all the costs associated with the interest-bearing portions of the capital stack, as well as pay back the entire funding if you have a fully successful program. So this is how you then tie the upfront funding to the size of the success pool. Next slide, please. So we're actually getting towards the end. This is not, this is really just a purposeful overview of each of the models and where they are. In introduction, and I think a lot of the benefit is going to come out of the question and answer, and I'll be happy to go back and talk in more detail on each of these. But as an overview of how they function, we're nearing the end now. So the scenario drivers, just like for the population flow, we have a summary chart to be able to describe what the assumptions and outcomes are with the population. We have an overall pay for success scenario driver chart that summarizes the entire program into one tab, one spreadsheet that is more accessible and has the high-level information for the entire program in one place. Again, this draws and connects from each of those individual models, which are mutually dependent, but into one sort of summary of the entire program. Next slide, please. And again, when you understand the cash flow from both the size of the capital stack and the initial funding, as well as the success payments on the opposite side, you can get a total quarterly cash flow analysis, which is relatable to the number of people being served, as well as the differential outcome between the control group and the intervention group, leading to success payments. So you can model what you assume or what you project to be the outcomes, and then that same model, as the data comes in and populates, can help inform what the quarterly cash flows are going to be at the back end. And again, it allows for review by each of the parties, what the assumptions are, what they can see their piece is on both the population side and the cash flow side, and come to agreement and work through those issues and items of needs from each of the players, so you can get to a mutual agreement. Without the model, you end up discussing past each other a lot of times because you don't have the same common frame of reference. So the modeling is really the ground truth that brings everyone to the table for an honest discussion of what they need in terms of cash flow, in terms of evaluability for population size and the like. Next slide. So then, as I was saying, with the quarterly cash flow, it includes both the drawdown against the capital stack as well as the waterfall at different levels of success. So you can see and model out the exact terms of the pay for success arrangement. So as success payments come in, every party to the contract will understand where they sit and how the success payments will redistribute to each of the initial funders. And this varies obviously by the terms of the agreement, but in general, the senior tranches get their returns more quickly, and then the philanthropic are later and are able to recycle their grants as they need to. Often now we're seeing more providers have skin in the game by deferred payments and are part of the waterfall as well. Even if they're not putting their own capital forward, they have deferred payments to the end as well. All right, next slide, please. And the big takeaway, the big reason for doing this is to show that there can be captured savings as well. So not only do you model the success payments over time, you can use the same model that shows what the cost would have been to model out the savings, which would be the differential between what the cost of the counterfactual group would have been versus the cost of the success payments, which is great as you go in because it allows for justification of the program, so everyone knows again what the value add of the overall program is at different levels. It's also valuable for the end payer to be able to justify the value proposition and the need for success payments if you can do this. And again, if it's especially powerful if you say, we didn't just do this on the back of an envelope assuming certain things, but this is out of the exact model being used to do the intervention design, the evaluation design, and in modeling the correct elements of the success payments as written in the contract. Great. Well, thank you. Next slide. So to summarize, and potentially a little bit more question and answer time here, but I'm happy to go into more depth back on any of those as I can. You need to be able to summarize all of the models into what are those critical factors that are either assumptions leading into the program or the outputs of the model. There are certain players who will be happy to just get the entire set of models delivered to them, and they'll go through and recreate and understand what the entire modeling project does. But there are others that just want to know what were those critical assumptions, do I agree with those, and how do they impact my organization? And being able to summarize those in a very approachable way is important, because you don't want to have to walk everyone through a very complex model every time you have a discussion. And the individual modeling elements are also important, not as standalone pieces, but because they each interact with another model along the process. So again, we start with the population, total reachable population. You look at how that population enters the program over time through the referral pathway. You use that to build your cost structure. You integrate your cost structure over the length of the program, and you see what the total capital stack requirement is. The capital stack drawdown over time gives you what your necessary success payments have to be. Your necessary success payments over time give you your waterfall, and then as a complete both waterfall of success payments and drawdown schedule gives you your quarterly cash flow over the entire program, which is how you link all of these pieces back together. So if some general rules about modeling, if you have multiple elements, right, if you have your population model and you have your cost model, they should talk to each other. Otherwise, you can get into serious problems of an assumption made on one page or within one model is different than an assumption on another model. So a general best practice we have is it's all in one document that is self-referential and consistent throughout. That's a really important piece. The other is to have the summary findings. You need to be able to tell people what it means to them without getting into the detail. You better know the detail, because for diligence review, that's very important, and you need to be able to express exactly what's happening, and you should be conversant and comfortable with it, but you shouldn't have to walk everyone through every detail to have a useful model. So those are some big high-level takeaways. Given that, as the poll showed, it's largely on the more novice end, so this is as an introduction. On our own internal training, oftentimes we go into what Excel functions you use into the nitty-gritty, but from an introduction to modeling and how it fits into Pay for Success as a whole, I hope this answers that. And next slide. That's where we were, and I'd be happy to open it up to questions and answers now.
Great. Brian, thank you so much. That was a lot of wonderful information. So I think that we will unmute your phones, and we have plenty of time for question and answer. I think that the last count there were about 60 people on the phone, because we have grantees and subs. So we'll just unmute, and let's just do our best. You know, if people talk over one another, I'll try to take note of who is saying what. So let's unmute.
There's also the hand-raising function, which is a good way for us to call on people and screen those people who know how to use the call or hand-raising function.
Absolutely. So, does anyone have a question?
Yeah, this is Mark Tremblay from DO.
But that's still $10,000.
Mark, from where?
From DOH.
$10,000.
Say that one more time, Mark. Where are you from?
Department of Health, New York State.
Oh, from Department of Health. Okay. Hi there. How are you?
Good, good. This is awesome. I just have a couple of questions. One is, you know, we think about like the cost of, say, a certain population or subset of population as supportive housing, right? Like, you know, from a healthcare standpoint or other supportive services that are required, maybe institutional costs or whatever. But then when we think about housing, it gets a little weird because of the mix of like capital versus stipend, right? And then of course you got LTSS, and sometimes you have healthcare, and you have all these different components of cost. So one thing I was wondering, does it make any sense in terms of understanding like hard beds, capital funded beds, to think of them in terms of what is the, what's like the debt service obligation associated with the bed in terms of thinking about the cost to move someone to supportive housing?
Yeah, so I think I got the basic underlying premise there. It was a little difficult. You're cutting in and out a little bit, but as I understand, the question is many costs, especially in housing, are multifaceted, and they have a different cost structure associated with them, as well as potentially different time periods and the like, and some are capital costs, some are operating costs, and how do you deal with this complex cost environment? Is that about right?
Yes, that's correct.
So this goes into some of the detail that is in the model, and you do have to carry those costs forward in different ways. So yes, some costs, especially like you said in homelessness, the cost, you can imagine if you're providing supportive housing, is carried by the provider regardless of whether or not somebody is in there, as well as then you have variable costs where if someone is in the supportive housing, you have the wraparound services, which are variable costs, right?
Right.
So you do have to model this, and the way we've done it, not just in housing, but in a lot of well, the home visitation or mentorship programs are another one where you pay a professional mentor who has a given capacity, which is a fixed cost, but you have then different variable costs depending on the number of people assigned to that particular mentor. And you can model this in a spreadsheet by carrying the fixed cost of capacity separate than the variable cost of individual service provisioning. So we actually do this where you look at the number of people in the referral pathway and you determine what the capacity you need to have is, and actually sometimes it's even more complex if you have multiple geographies where you need your local capacity to be matched to a local population. So you have this infrastructure cost as one element, and then we'll have a variable cost, which is the service providing based on the actual number of people. And yes, the capacity and the number who are being served do fluctuate. They're correlated, but they do fluctuate independent of each other. But you can track that by carrying your capacity-driven cost as a separate line item than your individual service cost. And then at the end of your total cost model, you add up all of those fixed costs, infrastructure costs, as well as your direct individual variable costs on a quarter-by-quarter basis. There's actually, it can get more complex than that. You can imagine as your population fluctuates, you won't want to add or delete infrastructure costs more quickly than you need to. So, for example, if you have excess infrastructure on one quarter, but you anticipate that you would need it in a future quarter, you're not going to sell off an asset. You're going to maintain that infrastructure. So the model can have a lot of binary switches or floors and ceilings or delays in how quickly you'll let a given capacity fluctuate.
Right.
But I would consider that more of a modeling 201 into how exactly that happens, but those are all factors, you're exactly right, those are factors you need to think through and make sure are represented in your model.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark. And I believe that you are a stub of CSH in the SIB lab coming from New York State. So thanks for your question.
Jenny, this is Sam, your host.
Hi, Sam.
Hi. Would you like me to launch the second poll?
Yes, please. Thank you, Sam.
That's all.
So we have a poll coming, but we can take questions during that time as well. Does anyone have another question?
There is a question in the chat.
Could you read it, Sam?
Sure. It says, do you have a generic cost model template in Excel available for us to manipulate and or tailor to our respective social issue projects?
That's a great question, and I think one I would ask me too. But unfortunately, we don't. As you can imagine, the exact modeling techniques and the format is sort of the core of what we think our value add is. So we keep that pretty close. And in fact, our models have a lot of non-disclosure statements directly on the model itself. So we hold it pretty tight. We're happy to talk about techniques, but sharing the exact files is something we shy away from. I'm sorry.
I should also just make a note that the second webinar in this series will get a little more specific, and not exactly sure how specific we're going to get, but we'll dig a little more deeply into two particular projects, into the Utah project. Janice Debno is going to take us through that, and Danielle Cerny is going to take us through one of the Massachusetts projects. So we may be able to get slightly more specific there, but so hopefully that will be a little bit more helpful. Any other questions? Okay, well, we should, let me just remind folks that the webinar is recorded. So we will certainly send this back to you, and you can use as you like with your colleagues that couldn't make it today. So thank you all so much for dialing in. I hope that this was a valuable 45 minutes. I know for me, I really learned quite a lot from Brian. So please reach out with any questions, concerns. Brian has his email up there. You all have mine, obviously. And we just hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks.
For those of you still on the line, this is the host, Sam, and I plan on ending this webinar in just a moment. Thank you for joining.